Spirit Airlines plane spews parts after Detroit takeoff. The FAA is looking into why a Spirit Airlines plane was spewing parts after a Detroit airport takeoff on Monday night. The Spirit flight from D-Town to Hot-lanta was forced to return to Detroit Metro Airport after experiencing engine failure. The plane was able to land safely without incident, but unfortunately dumped a bunch of engine pieces into the yards of Detroit residents. The FAA sent investigators to look into what went wrong and to examine the recovered engine parts. The investigation should be concluded in the coming weeks. According to one passenger on the flight, the plane was at about 5,000 feet when there was a large bang that caused the aircraft to shake and shudder. The passenger said the right engine was on fire, sparking, and losing pieces. And here we thought it was just Spirit trying to save money by getting rid of plane engines. Flying is so much fun.
Drunk passenger attacks passengers and crew on flight to Mexico. An Aeromexico plane from San Francisco to Mexico City was forced to make an emergency landing after a drunk passenger went nuts 30,000 feet up in the air. The trouble began on Aeromexico flight AM 664 when the man started yelling mid-flight for no apparent reason. He then started harassing other passengers and flight attendants after they came over to see what the commotion was about. After making an emergency landing at Guadalajara Airport, it took 4 security guards to pull the highly combative passenger off the aircraft. He must have been hungry, too, because he was trying to bite people as well. One witness said it took about 40 minutes to get the guy off the plane. She said he was hitting and punching other passengers as they went united on him, and that he reeked of alcohol.
United Airlines sends rapper Schoolboy Qs' dog to the wrong city. Just when you realize you haven't heard United Airlines mentioned in the headlines lately, a fresh new PR disaster pops right up. This past weekend, a passenger's pet ended up in the wrong city, and unfortunately for the troubled airline, this particular passenger carries his own mic. On July 14th, rapper Schoolboy Q boarded a flight from Missouri to Burbank, California. During a stopover in Denver, arrangements had been made for a French bulldog puppy he just purchased to be loaded onto his connecting flight. But when Schoolboy Q landed and went to greet his new pet, he was stunned to find someone else's animal in the cage. Turns out the poor little pup had been switched by mistake during the flight transfer and was on his way to Chicago. As you can imagine, the Grammy-nominated artist was none too pleased and voiced his displeasure on Twitter, demanding answers. Thankfully, United managed to locate the puppy, named Yurndamin, and reunited him with his famous owner a few hours later. United issued the disgruntled rapper a full refund and a public apology, but unsurprisingly, Schoolboy Q still has a serious bone to pick with the airline. He told CNN he plans on suing.
Things are going from bad to worse for United Airlines. A former United Airlines customer is claiming staff once threatened to handcuff him if he didn't give up his seat to make way for a higher priority traveler. High-flying businessman Jeff Ferns came forward with his story after the forcible removal of a passenger from a United plane on Sunday. Ferns paid $1,000 for a first-class ticket from Hawaii to LA last week, but was then told to get off the plane. The finance executive said United staff told him somebody more important had showed up at the last minute, and if he didn't budge, they'd remove him by force. Ferns was eventually downgraded to economy and placed between a married couple who refused to sit next to each other and argued for the entire 6-hour flight. Back at home, Ferns asked United for a full refund and a $25,000 donation to the charity of his choice. As the LA Times puts it, that's how rich guys do it. United turned down both requests and instead offered Ferns the difference between the first-class ticket and an economy ticket. The airline then got in touch a week later to offer a $500 credit for a future trip, but Ferns said he would never fly United again. This latest PR blow to the airline comes in the wake of the forcible removal of passenger Dr. David Dow from a Chicago to Louisville flight on Sunday. On Wednesday, United offered a full refund to everyone on that flight and said it would no longer get the cops to remove passengers from planes that were too full. What's more, Chicago's Department of Aviation said 2 more officers involved in the removal of Dow had now been placed on leave pending an investigation. 3 officers in total have now been placed on leave. Meanwhile, attorneys for Dow filed an emergency request with an Illinois state court to force United to preserve video and other evidence related to the removal of their client from the plane, which in all likelihood means the lawyers are preparing a huge-ass lawsuit for damages against United Airlines. Cuba is opening up even more to U.S. citizens. Formerly frosty relations between the United States and Cuba continue to thaw this week as our neighbors to the south begin accepting scheduled flights from U.S. airliners again. A JetBlue flight from Fort Lauderdale to Santa Clara on Wednesday was the first scheduled passenger flight between the U.S. and Cuba after 50 years. U.S. airlines are now allowed to fly to Havana and 9 other Cuban airports, adding 300 new flights per week to the formerly hardline communist island state. Traveling by sea to Cuba is also an option. Cruise company Carnival goes from Miami every other week, stopping in Havana, Cienfuegos, and Santiago de Cuba. Uncle Sam still technically forbids U.S. citizens from traveling to Cuba solely for tourism. But in reality, no one's checking once you tick that box. American trips to Cuba must fall within one of 12 categories, which include visiting relatives, professional research, journalism or religious activities. Organized or independent people-to-people tours are also permitted, so long as they include a full-time schedule of activities and meaningful interaction between the traveler and individuals in Cuba.